he's a little more of a peer in the early canon.
Yes.
And that's something that I started talking with my friends is like, when you look at these interpretations of Holmes, you have to think about why the writers are writing this way. Sometimes there's a narrative purpose, like in the early films with Basil Rathbone, the writers didn't quite understand how to portray someone as being brilliant without having a diminishing character to play off of.
Yeah.
But now that we've had a number of years of writing experience in movies and television, we can actually portray this relationship more effectively and more realistically while still not diminishing Holmes's brilliance.
Exactly. I assume you've seen Murder by Decree.
Yes,
with Christopher Plummer and James Mason. To me, James Mason is the perfect Watson.
He really is. He's a fantastic Watson. And the Granada series also does a really good job of a Watson who is much more incisive, and you can almost see, if you read the Granada series, the idea of this was actually happening, and then Watson goes and writes them. You can see the part where Watson's like, well, I wasn't really that smart. And the Granada series is really brilliant about kind of taking some of those lines that Holmes did and slightly putting them on Watson without diminishing Brett's interpretation.
Yeah.
Murder by Decree is very similar. It does not diminish Holmes at all, but Watson feels like a worthy ally to Holmes, which I think is so important to a more canonical, appropriate reference to Watson, is that he has to feel like a worthy friend, someone who can keep up with Holmes, and not always intellectually, but in different ways, emotionally or through loyalty. He has different characteristics, but he has to be worthy of Holmes' attention to have captured his attention for so long.
Well, sometimes Watson is Holmes' ambassador to humanity.
Certainly.
There's certainly things about the normal person that Holmes just does not get.
So there's certainly a number of scenes in the canon where Holmes flat says, the fairest section is your department, Watson. And that's one area, but certainly there's other smaller areas where Watson kind of brings forth information about culture and society, referencing astronomy or other elements, to kind of ground Holmes in the fact is that it's not just an intellectual puzzle. Similarly, I've seen some pastiche writers who try to make some touching moments where they talk about their first names, and it's like, the reason why they used their last names wasn't because there was this stiff relationship. It was because that's what gentlemen used when they referred to each other familiarly.
Yeah.
If they were formal, they would use Mr. But if they just Holmes or just Watson, that's actually a familiarity. And first names is what only families and loved ones used.
Yes, precisely. And Lestrade doesn't get into that club.
No.
Holmes calls him Lestrade, but Lestrade always gets Mr. Holmes. He doesn't get to step quite that close.
Right, because Lestrade never feels like he's that close to him.
Well, he isn't. Lestrade is really a fascinating character to me because he must have great gifts of humility to keep coming back to Holmes time and time again.
And that's actually one of the things that I have notes on, I want to work on is I do want to start writing Lestrade stories because I had a great opportunity. There's this wonderful place here in Atlanta called the Shakespearean Tavern, and they actually put on different Shakespearean plays. But they also did a back-to-back of Hamlet and then Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was wonderful to be able to see those back-to-back, and I really started thinking at that point in time I would love to write Study in Scarlet from Lestrade's perspective. Because you're right, Lestrade was, by Holmes' admission, the best of a bad lot. He's not only competing with Holmes, but also Gregson. And multiple times when he has a problem, immediately comes with all due humility and says, I don't care about my pride, I want to get this man caught.
Yeah.
And so the other point was I really wanted to tell my story because I think Lestrade is a much better police officer than he is an antagonist to Holmes.
Yeah.
And I want to start working on these ideas of telling some of these canonical stories from Lestrade's perspective, and also playing a bit with, we don't see much about the relationship he has with Gregson. We don't see much about the relationship he has with the other officers at Scotland Yard. I'm just digging into that a bit more and how the relationship of this metropolitan police force that's still trying to find its feet. Peel's only really been doing this for a couple decades now.
Yeah.
Still trying to find validity, still trying to get public support. And you have this outsider coming in and just solving cases. How's that relationship work?
Right, we'll be talking with Amy Thomas. Amy has written a unique series, I think. It's called The Detective and the Woman, and what it does is bring Sherlock Holmes and one of his nemesis, Irene Adler, together later in life, and they meet as middle-aged people and form a separate partnership. The books are quite interesting, and I hope you'll find that Amy is too. Amy Thomas.
So tell us a little bit about the Baker Street Babes. The Baker Street Babes is an international all-female podcast. We hail from countries in the UK and the United States, and we podcast about everything to do with Sherlock Holmes. It can be anything from the canon to all kinds of pastiche, comics, video, any kind of screen adaptations. We love anything to do with Sherlock Holmes.
So no rules, you just do?
Exactly. There's 11 babes currently. Sometimes it changes, people will come and go, but we have different areas of interest, of entry points into the Sherlock Holmes world. Some of the girls came in because of the BBC series. Some of us had read them since we were children. Some of the girls are really into the Jeremy Brett Granada series. So for anything that comes across kind of our attention, there's somebody who's into it. And so we have 11 of us so that we can kind of switch off on who wants to do which podcast, things like that. But we cover pretty much anything if it relates to Sherlock Holmes in any way.
We've pretty much come to the end of our little ride here. I had to leave out a lot. I had to leave out many of the panels, for instance, because I was a guest and a panelist myself. And also my equipment I had simply picked up all the ambient noise and nobody could hear anything. I didn't want you to subject you to that. I had other obligations, but I hope you enjoyed this little glimpse into the world of Sherlock Holmes fandom. And with any luck, we'll see you at 221B Convention in 2015. This is Steve Seitz. Thank you.